Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of Health Talks with Dr. Trinh. The one show, maybe the only show that shows you the path to a healthier life and a happier future, one conversation at a time. And today we're going to try and talk about multiple streams with a couple of guys that know all about the updates, what's going on with Alzheimer's these days here. Right, Dr. Trinh?
Hey, good morning, Paul. Well, I am happy to bring Jim on again, and President and CEO of Alzheimer's Orange County.
Jim McAleer we're talking about here. Good.
Yes.
I don't know if that's Irish or Scottish
Jim
here. He's
McAleer.
going to have to explain that to us here.
A wee touch of the Scottish, to be sure, lad.
That's it. Okay. That's close enough. We're cousins here. I'm Irish, so there you go.
Well, I'm about a third each, British, Irish, and Scottish, so we didn't get out of the islands much in the old days.
Yeah, right. Exactly here.
And we've got a lot to talk about today. And
Every time I turn around in the last month or two or three, I see somebody talking about Alzheimer's. Is this just good PR, Jim, or is there something going on?
Well, in the first place, there's a ton going on in the research space.
Right.
Just yesterday, we heard about artificial intelligence impact on diagnosis and identification early on and where that might go. We just heard a report a couple of weeks ago on donanemab. So donanemab is a drug that hasn't been approved by the FDA, but is likely to be fast-tracked. It shows about a 27% cognitive lift in the earliest stages of the disease. Leqembi or lecanemab was approved in January. Also an over 20% increase in cognition in the early stages. All the way back to last year around this time when there was a lot of controversy over a new drug, where some FDA folks resigned in a huff over it getting approved. So there's been a lot in that space. And on top of it, our organization in Orange County just released a week and a half ago new data in Orange County that says our numbers went from 84,000 10 years ago to 160 plus thousand people with Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment in the county. So all of that is buzz in the space, and all of it creates a lot of interest, and folks are starting to sit up and take notice.
What's the one, Dr. Trinh, you do some clinical studies. That's one of your many hats you wear. What's the drug that you guys are been studying and trying to take?
We've been involved in essentially just about all the drugs that are in the news, actually, at Irvine Clinical Research. We've been a participant in the lecanemab, in collecting data and enrolling patients and subjects for that. And currently now we're at probably the highest enrolling site globally for donanemab in one of their recent studies as well. So I've been very active. I go there and I lick it every day. But I may be licking placebo, so who knows? I'm just kidding, guys. But I've been very active with all these meds.
So let's start with the first one that was a year ago. I think we had Jim on. I know we had some other people on, and we talked about this controversial drug that costs $1 gazillion and only works for a select group of people. And everybody was afraid this was going to crash Medicare. This was going to disrupt the world. Or is this finally the hope after 20 years of nothing, some little faint hope? And in fact, as you said, the I forgot how it worked, but the panel that recommends this to the FDA said don't do it, and the FDA went ahead and did it, and the panel resigned in a huff, or a bunch of people did. Talk about that.
9 out of 10, and it's the FDA panel. So first of all, the drug is aducanumab. Okay. It has some of the same side effects lecanemab has, brain bleeding, brain inflammation. Now, the brain inflammation sounds probably a little bit worse than it is in the real world. It actually is a side effect that can come on and then decline. But aducanumab's efficacy, how well it worked, was a real question.
Yeah.
Did it really meet its endpoints or not? It really didn't look like it to most of the scientists I talked to. And the 9 folks who bolted from the FDA panel, we're talking people from the Mayo, from Sloan Kettering. These are not schleppazoids. These are some really smart people who said, wait a minute, guys, it doesn't look like, one, it doesn't look like it does it. And two, even more importantly to them, you're not following a decades-long process that is designed to keep people safe and to tell people whether things work or not. You combine that with massive cost, and it was quite the deal. I think lecanemab solves a lot of those problems. It's still $26,500 a year. But if you look at the cost of Alzheimer's, we're whining about the cost of Medicare. and it's way cheaper after its 27% cognitive impact than any kind of institutional care that we can put on, or in-home based care, or any of it. So it's fascinating to me that we're in a financial conversation about a drug that, if it does what it clearly says it does, would save more than it costs. And Doc, I'd be interested to see if you am I off base there, or is that close?
Absolutely. It just takes one hospitalization from a patient with dementia to make up for all that.
But the fear was that doctors would misdiagnose or misprescribe this. They would just give it, okay, think we got Alzheimer's, let's just take it, and without really understanding not only the chance of a success, but who is successful. Are these just targeted at a few? Do you have to have certain types of something, or is this good for everybody here? Again, with the understanding it only works for a certain percentage here.
The aducanumab is effective in people with apolipoprotein 4, a copy of the ApoE4 is what we hear. So it's a smaller percentage of the population, but lecanemab, if I'm not mistaken, Doc, is more globally applicable to folks with the earliest stages of the disease. So it's a much broader pool. It's what I'm hoping it will do is not that docs will just throw it across the transom and say, hey, you might have dementia, but it'll encourage them to actually diagnose more, because now the perception is there's something we can do. The reality is, even without lecanemab or other drugs, there's a lot we can do with social interventions and keeping people safe and planning for their future. But I think from a clinical standpoint, from a doctor's perspective, here's something I can prescribe is a thing. Doc, what do you think?
Absolutely. Prior to these medications, really there wasn't a big sense of hope in the fact that we have anything that's FDA approved that can make a significant dent. So doctors weren't even looking, because they're like, why should I look? There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can offer. But now with these new medications, there is something we can do. And there is a reason for early detection and a reason for screening to find patients who may benefit from these medications early. And these medications are approved for mild Alzheimer's and also what we call pre-Alzheimer's or early Alzheimer's, MCI, mild cognitive impairment, which is the stage before you get that Alzheimer's diagnosis. So in order to benefit from this medication, you need to be diagnosed at that stage. If you went later and you're diagnosed, like most patients are today, in the moderate stage of the disease, you're too late, and the opportunity for these medications is gone.
Because there's nothing that turns back the clock yet. It just might delay this, right?
It slows progression.
Right.
Yes.
So it slows down where you're at. But to Doc's point, people come in for a diagnosis or get diagnosed in the moderate stage most often. Now, that doesn't mean they don't know and their families don't know what's going on. Yep. In most of those cases, from an anecdotal perspective, and we're talking about thousands of people we deal with, so it's pretty good anecdotal evidence. They know, it's barking like a dog, it's quacking like a duck. They know that there's a dementia likely happening here.
Right.
So the trick is to get those folks who know there's a memory complaint to their clinician to diagnose it, and to get these drugs out earlier and earlier. We got to get people into the real system earlier if these things are going to be effective.
So is Dr. Trin's talked about this before. Is that then the next step that needs to be figured out? Because Dr. Trin talks about misdiagnosing. I think you have it. Oh, you really have a urinary tract infection that's mimicking this. Whatever, or it's some other cause or some other thing here. Is that the next step? Are we just not diagnosing this well?
100% we're not diagnosing it enough. So start with 12 to 15% of memory impairing conditions are treatable. They're medication interactions, they're depression or something else. So if you're worried about your memory, what if you've got the lucky roll of the dice, and it's something that can be fixed, cured, or at least significantly impacted in a positive way.
Right.
Secondly, there's a lot of things that need to be happening if you do have dementia, whether it's diagnosed or not, from everything from family planning to the future to also what are your wishes, to things like making sure you're maintaining a brain healthy lifestyle. Because we do know that outside of lecanemab, diet, exercise, and social interaction are the three best things you can do to slow progression.
Right.
So if you're 85, slowing that progression by 2 to 3 years are pretty important years.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yep.
But why does it get misdiagnosed, Dr. Trinh? Is it because we don't have a blood test, or it's not just that simple? It's all observational. It's all subject to, I don't know. It's
The most common reason that this gets missed is the perception that I'm forgetful because I'm old.
yeah.
And so it's not really even a misdiagnosis, it's just undiagnosed.
You're old. What do you
We're not
expect?
a diagnosis at all.
Yeah. What do you expect? You're old. Next. Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
that's by the way, is from the clinicians.
Yes.
That often is the expectation from the clinicians. You lose a little bit of brain plasticity as you age. That's true. People often note in retirement after leaving work that they're having a harder time in recall of numbers and that sort of thing. But part of that is simply the practice of using those parts of your intellect. So aside from that, smaller reduction in brain plasticity, there ain't a whole lot of backsliding that happens from just nature.
Yeah.
So it's something that needs to be treated.
Why? This is my own little soapbox rant here. Having watched my late mother, my late father, and my mother's sister, all of whom I ended up taking care of because I'm an only child here, I saw as they got older, doctors spent less and less time with them. Their need for a doctor went up dramatically. Their incidence of cancer and heart failure and things and stuff skyrocketed in the last few years. And as they did, the doctors just kind of shrugged and went, what do you expect? I want to deal with somebody younger, healthier that I can really help. You're old. You got too much going on. Is that just me feeling that they got less and less interested as the patient got older and sicker here? What do you think, Dr. Trinh? Do old people get treated the same way as younger people?
Well, there's a logistics problem because each doctor is given 15 to 20 minutes per patient.
Right.
And as you get older, your lists of health conditions get longer.
Yeah, right, right.
And so if you're coming in with a list of 5 different conditions, cholesterol, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, whatever that is, where is their time in that 15 minutes to discuss about your memory?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a systems problem.
Right. And I still say it's kind of a bias problem. A doctor wants somebody young. I can help them. I can do something with them. You've got too much happening. You're cascading. You're failing. You're getting older. I can't do as much for you, or maybe I'm frustrated, or maybe I'm just not interested. But I didn't see the same interest going through those latter stages. I wonder if we need more geriatric care, if we need a different sort of physician at that point in time here.
There's a dearth of geriatricians in the nation, and absolutely in Orange County. We do not have enough geriatric specialists by far.
Yeah.
Those we do have are just so inundated with their caseloads that they have very little time to get from room to room. I'm not defending the ageism, because it absolutely exists in the healthcare systems for sure. But there are a lot of, as Doc said, there are a lot of systemic problems. There are too few geriatricians. There's too little time. Insurance, including Medicare, does not cover enough time to adequately have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Seniors need more processing time. Mm-hmm. All of those things. And with memory loss, we're talking about a condition people are embarrassed about. Yes. It's like sexual health in younger people, or mental health in anyone's age.
Right.
It's a hard topic to talk about. You can't just go, hi, you're experiencing memory problems. That doesn't really get you there.
Right. Exactly. All of that I saw with my father, my mother, and my aunt as they got older. One, it does take more time to process them. One, because they get a longer list. And two, because they take longer to explain it. They want to go through everything. It takes them a while to spit it out. And the doctors are like, hey, I don't have the time. And they start just guessing and saying, I know. And they actually would start talking about them as if they weren't in the room to the nurse or somebody here. Mr. Roberts, I've seen Mr. Roberts. He has this and everything. And my dad would say, I'm here. You can talk with me. You can talk.
That's the first sign if you're dealing with someone with dementia or any senior. If their clinician talks to you first, find a new clinician. I mean, that's just inappropriate. And I'm talking even about cases where the person with the disease is farther along in the process and perhaps can't participate effectively. They should still be spoken to first and included in the conversations out of both respect, and so that we all understand that human is still in the room. They're still with us, and they still deserve that.
Had that happen all the time. My late aunt, literally, as soon as the doctor hit the room, he'd looked at the charts, he'd seen the info. He would start dictating his notes to his little recorder or to his nurse. And it was like she was invisible. And then I'm with her, so he'd start talking with me. Never once did he turn around and say, "How do you feel today? I know how you feel. You're aching, you're hurting, you're 1,000 other things here. You're forgetful." And I just thought that was horrible. They got treated more as I don't know, it was like going in with my pet, my veterinarian or something here, and less with my parent. It was horrible to watch. So we've got some issues of why you're getting sicker, you're getting older, it's harder I don't have the time to do this. Does Alzheimer's matter in the long list? Are we looking for heart first and cancer and all the big heavy lifters, and you're forgetful? Yeah, that's way down the priority list. And is that where it should be?
Well, the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone. So your brain health is your heart health, is your body health. So one of the things that science is becoming increasingly clear about is circulation is absolutely fundamental. Body chemistry is body chemistry. So the doc can speak to this far more specifically than I can, but just with what I read from the scientific journal side, it's absolutely true that you have to pay attention to your heart while you're paying attention to your brain, while you're thinking about everything from your sight to your balance. They're all incredibly interrelated. Doc?
Absolutely. What's good for the body is good for the brain. What's good for the brain is good for the body. And we're learning over the years, based on the high number of failed clinical trials in Alzheimer's, that you can't really come up with one pill that's going to solve this problem, because everything is interconnected. I'm personally leaning toward the fact that Alzheimer's isn't necessarily a single brain problem, but more of a systems problem, a multi-systems problem that all affect the brain. And so we need to approach this from a multi-systems approach, whether it's inflammation, circulation, toxins exposure, nutrition. I mean, why is it that there are 12 modifiable risk factors published in the Lancet in year 2020 that contributes to up to 40% of Alzheimer's? And these modifiable risk factors fall in different systems of the body. If Alzheimer's is one problem in the brain, right? And so it's very interesting, the way we're looking at it and how research is evolving.
But again, we've talked about, we're back to a systemic problem here. Doctors are focused on finding the one thing and the one pill and the one solution, the one operation, the one thing that'll have the most impact. And the secondary stuff, memory loss and other things, I think gets lost in the shuffle. They don't focus on that, and they're not trained to look holistically. I don't know why. They tend to be very micro focused on what's this and why is that and this spiked and this is happening. How do we get away from that approach and look at a more systemic approach?
Well, money drives the mission.
Yeah.
So when you look at what's really being done in science, it's funded by pharmaceutical for the most part. Certainly there's NIH money, but what's happening as far as single source vision, right, is because Biogen or Eisai or whomever is trying to find a drug that will impact one thing, because that's what drugs tend to do, is impact a specific thing.
Right.
So the far majority of money, we're talking over $200 million per clinical trial, is directed at those very linear and focused issues. What really needs to happen is there needs to be more money where people step back from those linear focused issues and look at the whole system. If you look at how it worked with HIV and AIDS, we found one drug that impacted one thing. It was the first effective drug, and it was not the game changer that people remember it. It actually didn't do a whole lot, but it extended life. Then the next drug extended a little more. Then they found the cocktail. And when they put a lot of drugs together, it started really extending people's natural life into more normal natural life time spans. So I think that's likely to happen with Alzheimer's and dementia. You're going to find something that impacts the inflammation, something that works on tau, or whatever your cascading features are, your dominoes.
Right.
Put them together.
So what do you think, Doc? Are we going back towards maybe it is just a cocktail approach? Maybe it is that you've talked about this in cannabis. Is it just the THC? Is it just the seed, whatever, is it the one component of the plant, or is it a cocktail effect that you really need all of these different components? So do we need a cocktail of drugs?
Absolutely. So if you're looking, I'll refer back to the 12 modifiable risk factors that was published in the Lancets, and that includes, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, brain exercise, lack of exercise, right? There's 12 different things that contribute to 40% of Alzheimer's. And if I were in a house and that house had a damaged roof where it was leaking in the rain, and there's 12 holes that were leaking. There's 12 leaky holes in the roof. I can't plug just one hole and expect a solution, right? I need to take a bigger view.
But that's what Jim is saying, that the drug companies want to find that one plug, that one whole solution.
Sure, it's the way, it's the reductionist, process of the scientific method is to look for that. But I need to take a step back and look at the entire roof. And what can I do to protect my roof rather than looking for one hole to plug? And we've been trying to plug one hole in the last 20 years with Alzheimer's studies, right? It's not for the lack of studies, not for the lack of hundreds of clinical trials in the last 20 years, trying to plug one hole at a time. And what do we get?
we get what you just shocked me with, Jim. The fact that despite all these breakthroughs, despite all this money and talking about it, you're telling me it's doubled, basically, the number of people that have this?
Doubled in Orange County, and it's doubling nationwide. Our county is older. 65 and older is the only growing percentage of the population in this county.
Yeah.
By 2060, get this, 25% of this county will be over 65.
Wow.
So that has huge impacts when you think about the need for caregiving, the need for ancillary supports, that sort of thing.
Right.
Also comes with huge opportunities. That's a great brain trust.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's still a time of great hope. I've been in this industry for 20 years, specific to seniors and Alzheimer's, and I've never felt more optimistic about what's happening in science than I do right now. We're starting to see something chip at least at the outside of the onion. So hopefully, as Dr. Trinh suggests, they'll start peeling back the layers and not just, try and cut to the core, because you got to get to the many different component parts.
Yeah, exactly. So why the sudden breakthrough in anything? You guys tell me for 20 years you chipped away at it, nothing happened, and all of a sudden, is it the effect of chipping suddenly starts to come apart faster? Are we suddenly understanding this thing better? Are we getting lucky, or are we just putting more money at it here?
I think all three of those things are true. A little bit of luck, a lot more money, and hard and fast tried and true effort. So if you look at the three drugs, they work on similar mechanisms. They're not completely disparate. They're relatively related. So that branch of science has found one pathway to impact at one level Alzheimer's disease. So there are many others that are being looked at, and my hope is that some of those others will begin to pop soon as well. So for example, when you look at the Columbia study, 3,000 members of a family with a familial form of the disease, which means about half of them are going to get Alzheimer's disease. 3,000 people, half.
Wow.
So that study is releasing some really good information about what we might look for on the layers of the onion. Those are all things that are coming to fruition, as we're talking now. So in the next 5 years, certainly the next 10, I would expect some pretty significant clinical advances. Doc, where are you at with your crystal ball?
Yeah, give us a deep dive into where we're headed with this. What do you think? What do you see? What's the next breakthrough?
So the majority of, believe it or not, the majority of studies being conducted today in Alzheimer's disease is no longer focused on removing amyloid. Removing amyloid is still very important, but it's not the majority of studies. And we're coming to that fact, and because it's evolving by the number of failed anti-amyloid studies, but also we got successful anti-amyloid studies. And so why is it that several organizations are trying to remove amyloid. Why are some successful and some are not successful? And there are some learning points that we've discovered on the differences of why that is. Removing an amount of amyloid to almost a level that's undetectable, or to a level that's undetectable, have shown to be successful compared to removing not enough amyloid. So quantity helps. Removing amyloid early enough in the disease process seems to make a bigger difference. For example, an MCI patient versus a moderate Alzheimer's patient's stage. So looking at that, we've learned a lot from that. And what's interesting, guys, is this, and this is kudos to the scientific process, and that we learn over time from previous failed studies. If you look at aducanumab had 2 phase 3 studies. One failed, and the other one barely succeeded, quote unquote succeeded in some view. And the difference between that was 20%. 20% in slowing down of memory loss between the placebo group and the treatment group. That was aducanumab. 1 year later, this year, lecanemab came out, and it moved the needle to 27%. Right? 27% 1 year later. Donanemab is the latest on the news, came out a week or 2 weeks ago, and it's now up to 35%.
Wow.
So isn't that interesting? Each medication kind of learns, each study kind of learns from the previous one, but the percentages are slowly improving. So kudos to the scientific process, but yet at the same time, none of these medications have actually stopped the progression of memory loss or reverse Alzheimer's or prevented Alzheimer's. So we need more.
So are we ever headed towards the holy grail, what everybody wants? And I'll say 2 holy grails. One is a blood test. I just simply do this and presto, I know you got it. It's not a guess. It's not a remove all the other options. And 2, even better, this is the fantasy of everybody with every disease, I can reverse it. I can't just slow it down. I can actually chip away at it and make my memory better. Any of that, blood tests or cures?
Well, the blood tests are certainly in development. The one that looks like it might have be a little closer to the finish line is actually an eye fluid test. The oligomers that they find and that they search for in spinal fluid often, little oligomers of beta amyloid, are found in eye fluid. So there's some really good, solid German research going on that looks like it might get to some kind of fruition, but there's certainly a fair number of blood tests in late stage clinical trial. So that, I think, is definitely on the horizon. Doc, you can correct me if I'm wrong there or add to that. But the cure is everything we're talking about. I don't think there will be a cure in the near or even long-term future. I think there will be treatments, personally. And I think those treatments will extend people's life often through the natural lifespan. I worry more about younger onset before 65 than I do about traditional onset after 65, that those folks may have a longer road to walk. But I do think that there will be treatments, if not a cure, in the next 10 years that significantly extend functional lifespan.
And as life itself gets extended, as we look at 100 being a realistic goal for a lot of people, does this just make it that much harder? Because when everybody died at 60, I from one of our many conversations years ago, Jim, you kind of said, well, think about this. When everybody died, if most Alzheimer's start onsetting at 65 and most people died by 65, we didn't see a lot of Alzheimer's.
Right.
As people live to 85 now, or whatever the norm is 80 or 75 or something, you're going to see more of that. And as life gets extended, is this just an unintended consequence? Ooh, we're keeping you around longer. Now we got to deal with all these other issues we never thought about before.
And not just dementia. We're dealing with a higher incidence of diabetes. We're dealing with a higher incidence of coronary disease. All of those things that are age-related conditions, or at least compounded by age, are certainly on the rise. At the end of the day, if 1 in 3 people at 85 have dementia, a pretty reliable statistic, and that number was only 1 in 6 at 65. What happens at 95? Yeah. What happens at 100? Right. What happens at 105?
Yeah.
We are looking at the complications of age growing just as our lifespans do.
Right. What do you think, Dr. Trinh? Is we have one step forward, two steps back? We're making people live longer, but we're adding to their problems as they get older here?
Maybe we don't cure Alzheimer's. Maybe we cure aging. Give me that anti-aging pill.
Yeah, right. Because that's the hope that everybody wants. That's why we're exercising more and trying to eat better and everything. We want to not just live longer, we want to live better. We want to have a quality of life right up until the curtain falls here. We don't want to have this 20-year, don't give me 20 years more of life. I always say the good news is I'm going to live to be 100. That's also the bad news. So what is it? Yeah.
I wish more people did more than say that.
Yeah.
As we watch what particularly Americans are doing as we age, we're not losing the weight in midlife so that we're healthier later in life. We figure out that we need to get fit in our 60s. Well, it's much, much harder to do that as we age. So I wish that we as a society, my hope for us is that we will begin to embed fitness, diet, and lifestyle far earlier in our lives and the lives of our children, because it is really hard to get fit or to do the things that will help you not have all these conditions when you're starting, late in the shoot.
And I see it, this is just anecdotal again, but I think there's some data supports it. Certainly what I see everywhere, the younger people, my children's and their friends and their generation, they're going backwards. They're getting heavier. They're eating more junk, not less junk. They're exercising less than we did, not more than we did. And even I've seen studies that say their life expectancy for the first time ever is going backwards. Is any of that true? If so, why, Dr. Trinh? Why are the kids doing worse than we did?
Well, we're fighting against a industrialized system that makes more profit when you eat more junk.
Yeah, right. It pushes
right?
Cheetos.
We have hidden the word sugar in labels now. Right? We don't call it sugar. It's everything else, corn syrup and fructose and sucralose and all that.
Right.
But yes, health doesn't always pay.
Health doesn't always pay, at least not for those selling the poison here, the heroin addicts, the heroin dealers. I hate to put it that way, but they're sort of selling us this kind of junk that's going to hurt us or kill us in the long time here. But it feels good and it tastes good here.
Mixed well with a life attached to screens of one sort or the other.
Yeah.
My son is 24 and spends a chunk of his day, several hours a day. He's in the Navy, so he's not under my control, on a computer screen playing games.
Yeah.
But we watch children, youth, and certainly adults spend an inordinate amount of time tied to a computer screen in the world of cyberland. Right. That keeps you out of the world of hiking, biking, swimming, Those kinds of things. So it even changes socialization, which has an impact cognitively. Yes. It'll be interesting to see in 40, 50 years what cognition really looks like for people who spent the majority of their time socializing remotely.
Yes, right. And believe me, we do a show on esports, and they're always, UC Irvine is the first school in the nation to offer varsity scholarships. It's a varsity. It's not just a after-school club. They're realizing, why are we fighting this? Kids don't want to bounce a basketball. They want to move a mouse. And so why not, if that's where they're going, then let's make this competitive. And yes, it can be team building, and yes, it can be strategy, and it's a lot of maybe brain work going on in here, but you're not moving your muscles a whole lot. You're not doing, you might be stressing, but you're not hiking 20 miles here anymore here when you're doing that. So yeah, all of this youth-driven culture that we have seems to be moving in the wrong direction. How much they move, what they put in their body, and how much they pay attention to this. I don't hear anybody when do you start paying attention to your brain health, Dr. Trinh? When you're 20 or when you're 80?
Unfortunately, we don't pay attention to our car until there's a red light that turns on.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So if your brain's working well, you don't normally think about it.
Yeah.
And but we're here to let folks know that maintenance is needed on a regular basis.
So we know for sure that we should be looking at brain health far earlier, just from the studies done on soccer, football, contact sports, on children, teens, and young adults. There is absolute proof that repetitive head injury is going to massively increase your risk of dementing conditions later in life. So I'm not saying you don't play sports. I'm saying we really got to think about this more than we are right now, because we just think they're indestructible because, oh gosh, they're 16. They're not.
Right. That's a whole nother thing about concussions. I was going to ask, is there proof that if I bang my head enough, it's not going to work well later in life here?
There's absolute proof that you're going to increase your risk of cognitive impairment. If you the multiple concussions for sure. And that's just not one study. That's pretty much accepted science.
When I was a kid watching the great Muhammad Ali deteriorate on screen, as you watched him develop what looked like Parkinson's and dementia and all these other things, because he got banged in the head for most of his life here.
Yes.
Chronic encephalitis, the NFL players have $1 billion fund because so many NFL players have gotten some type of impairing condition. They talk about people who are making really bad life choices. They start thinking it's mental health, and then they realize that there's a significant brain impairment due to early injury.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've even begun to start figuring out how much damage is done by some of that stuff.
But again, you're going countercultural here. We want to be, you said you wanted to get me outside, so great, we're going to bang into each other here. We don't want to eat well. We're eating, aren't kids getting fatter these days? It seems like they are. It seems like they're going the other direction.
They are.
And so that, and then plus this notion of I'll worry about it later. How do you sound the alarm, Jim? What do you guys do in Alzheimer's? Is it just all research and trying to put hold the dam, find out as the dam starts leaking, you try and start plugging it everywhere here, or are you trying to advocate maybe we better check the dam once in a while? Maybe we better get a little more preventative in this approach here.
We do a lot of work in brain screening and in brain training, in prevention. I think prevention is kind of a hard word to use because you aren't really going to prevent it, but in slowing its onset or slowing its progression, we do a lot of work in those arenas. But Doc used a good analogy. We're kind of like the mechanic. Very few people will come to those, no matter how bad we shout about it, until they perceive there to be an issue or a concern.
Yeah.
So our classes are not as full for folks who don't have any memory impairment, but looking to not get it. We have much fuller classes for people who either have already had it or know that there's a diagnosis there, even if it hasn't happened.
What about the one that worries me? My mother had died from she died with Parkinson's, and then that turned into dementia. So am I more likely to suffer from this? Everybody seems to say yes, or think there's a higher proclivity. Should we be getting genetic testing? Is there something that shows, or is it just history based?
So Parkinson's is a little different. Not everybody who develops Parkinson's develops dementia, but let's start with the first conversation of Alzheimer's and genetics. Chris Helmsworth just found out a while ago that there's ApoE4, apolipoprotein 4, in his family tree. Well, the reality with apolipoprotein and any gene is if you get a copy of a 2 from mom, you reduce your risk. 3 from mom, flat. 4, increase risk, and the same on your dad's side. But it's one gene. There are over 18 identified genes that impact Alzheimer's disease. So unless you're going to go and get a full genetic panel interpreted by a geneticist, the 23andMe stuff doesn't give you what you need to make competent decisions about your future healthcare. You should be living as if you are at genetic risk, because we're all at some kind of risk, genetic or other.
Right.
So I have a little bit of trouble with the way it's talked about. Not that people do it. You should do it if you feel like you're moved to do it. But the reality is, just because mom had it, dad had it, if they had it after 65, that traditional onset, you are no more or less likely than other folks, unless your gene panel dictates otherwise, right? So you have to look at that, and then look at what you're doing in your lifestyle with the other risk factors we talked about. What's your exercise? What's your brain health? All those sorts of things. So it's not a death sentence if mom and dad both had it. If it's all over your family and people are getting it before 65, you may have a genetic predisposition to a dementia, and you should get it looked at so you can act accordingly. Sorry, that's a bit of my soapbox. Doc, if I didn't say that right, hit me up.
Love it. Love it. Genetics plays a role, but lifestyle plays a huge, bigger role, in my view.
But yet we saw that with Chris Hemsworth. Here's the guy who plays Thor and all the movies here, and plus all these other big beefy parts, and that caught a lot of news. I don't remember what it was. Was it Alzheimer's that he had a predisposition for? There was something that he announced to the world, and everybody was shocked because Thor said it here. You know,
He screened for ApoE4.
yeah,
He had apolipoprotein 4. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe, and I don't know this for sure, but I believe my memory serves me, he had one copy of it, not two. So he is at significantly increased risk over the general gene pool who don't have that gene. But if I looked at his other panel, it could take his risk down. And I know his fitness takes his risk down.
yes,
I know getting beaten up on set takes his risk up. I know,
yeah,
there are all kinds of things that impact that equation. And it's not a simple, gosh, I'm probably going to get it now. And that's what worried me about that particular story is everybody went, oh my gosh, if I get that, Chris Helmsworth says, and I don't think that was his intention.
right.
Yeah,
So
one out of 4 Americans have this ApoE4, by the way.
What number was that? We cut out
1
there.
out of 4.
1 out of 4. Wow.
Yeah, 1 out of 4 of us have it. So lo and behold.
And
it's
even
not
if I
Chris.
found out I had that, then what would I do? I would eat better. I'd exercise more. I'd be more socialized. What is the? Give me the quick hit list. We all want the 5 things that'll fix my memory here. The 5 things that'll keep me getting Alzheimer's. What are they? What are the 3, 4, 5 things I can do to slow this? That I can do to slow this thing down.
Doc?
Doc.
I may not remember them all.
Yeah. Well,
socialization. Diet. Exercise are the top, by far and away, the top 3.
That's the 3 I guessed, right?
You can mix another 2 in there, but diet, exercise, and socialization. But we should be doing those anyway. So you get back your genetic panel and it says you're at 37% increased risk, 57% increased risk. Yeah, you should really focus on those things. But what if your genetic panel doesn't tell you that? You still have a risk of dementia. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get it. If you're overweight, beating your head against a wall, hiding in your home and those kinds of things. So everybody who's interested in avoiding a dementing condition or memory impairment should be really focused on those 3 things. The mind diet in particular, the Mediterranean diet, there's the heart diet. There's a ton of them out there that are not hard to follow. They're low in saturated fats. They're low in processed sugar. They're high in grains. They're not that hard to follow in today's world.
No, and even restaurants and other places are acknowledging a heart-friendly diet and all this kind of, some more olive oil and less saturated fat butters and other sorts of things here. But I still go back to, again, we're looking for a quick fix, and you guys are saying it's an attitude adjustment, it's a lifestyle adjustment. It's not, oh, I eat this. For a while, I read that if you ate cinnamon, that would help your brain. So great, I loaded up on cinnamon or something here, right? That's it all.
Turmeric, cinnamon, ginkgo biloba, avoid aluminum. I can go. Coconut oil was massive for a long time.
Yeah.
We got people shoving coconut oil down people's throats. And the research behind any one of those is spurious at best. Particularly cinnamon, by the way.
I eat cinnamon toast. If I get a choice, it's cinnamon. Put cinnamon on it. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying cinnamon's bad for you because it does have some heart implications, but the research isn't solid on the stuff they say it is. Right. What it is solid on is what it's harder to do.
Yeah.
To get out there and like exercise. You need to elevate your heart rate 3 times a week for 20 minutes or more. So you can't start from the couch. You have to start from when your heart's elevated.
Yeah.
Check with your doctor before you exercise. It doesn't have to be joining a gym and becoming Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. It needs to be becoming more active, parking your car at the far end of the parking lot, taking the stairs when you go to the office. It can be very, very simple things that can have a huge impact on your heart health and your brain health.
And I try and do all of those. I park further away than I want to. I'm on the 3rd floor at UCI's Applied Innovation Center. I try and walk more than I tend to take the elevator up and walk down. That's my cheat way of doing it. But at least I do some more walking on it here. And what about exercising your brain? There's all these things. Go online and play this brain game and you will be less likely. So I play these little brain games sometimes when I'm bored and I think, this isn't a waste of time. I'm helping my brain here. I'm solving something here. Does any of that matter or is it just marketing?
The world of Wordle.
Yeah.
It does have some clinical impact. There are a couple. Posit Science has a brain fit program that has had some decent research that shows it can maintain cognitive lift. At the end of the day, everything I've read, everything I've seen leads me to believe that keeping your brain active, be it learning a new language, learning a new dance, think learning something new, not just doing what you've always done.
Right.
Switch it up. So brain games absolutely can have a positive impact. I think personally, learning a new language in a group, joining a book club, those things that include socialization are probably even more helpful. Doc?
Absolutely. I just gave a comment for medical news today. They released they were talking about a study about music, how those who actively play music, whether you're playing a piano or a flute or things of that sort, has positive brain health benefits. There's brain health benefits to those who listen to music, but there's even higher brain benefit to those who are playing music. And it's interesting with that.
Because you got to do something, you got to think.
Yeah, you're
about
doing something, and you're connecting your hands and your mind and your face and all that.
Right.
But yes, learn is the key. As long as you're making new brain cell connections, neuroplasticity is the word.
And yet they tell me that it's harder to learn a language as you get older. It's much easier when you're two. And yet, a very good friend of mine, my hat's off to him. He used to like to eat Thai food. He's not Asian, and he's a good Midwestern kid like me. And I don't think he ever ate Asian food. He fell in love with it, and through that, he started conversing with the girls there. He said, "Tell me, just fascinated. What Thai is?" He ended up taking lessons, and he now travels to Thailand a couple times a year, and he can speak the language. In his 60s, he just found this fascinating to pick up a new language.
Good for him. One of my mom's friends learned piano at about 70.
Wow.
Yeah, and so and yet you tell yourself, it's too late. I can't learn piano now. That's what you do as a kid. I can't learn a language now. That's what I do as a kid. But I wonder if that's not an open opportunity for universities to bring people back to school later.
There's some great programs. Saddleback College in particular has a senior education program, a lot of which is free, by the way, where you can take all kinds of classes. And it's specifically designed for seniors. I believe Orange Coast College also has something. I'm not sure about UCI. But the senior learning opportunities are massive. There are also travel opportunities around education. All of those things are well worth looking into, and it's not just a waste of time.
Right. And because you've got a population that not all of them are economically sufficient, but a lot of them are, and they've got some income, and they've got some savings, and they've got some time on their hand. What are they going to do with it? It's not going to be my father's retirement. He's not just going to play golf endlessly here.
Well, and even for those of moderate income, the programs that are free are simply getting there.
Yeah.
It's your time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Time and
so what's new at Alzheimer's Orange County?
Yeah, we'll give you anything coming up, walks, talks, events, whatever.
Well, we just finished our walk in April, and thanks to those who joined us in Angel Stadium, that was about 3,000 of our closest friends out on a beautiful day. Our golf tournament is tomorrow, so that should be a lot of fun at Arroyo Trabuco. But in general, outside of the fundraising side of our world, we're doing a lot of work these days in reaching people who have dementia and live alone. So we have some federal grants and some state money to help us try and reach some folks who are kind of a lot harder to engage, both out of fear and also just for lack of access. So we're expanding in that area. We're also expanding in the area of multicultural outreach. I mean, people think of Orange County, they think of Real Housewives. Well, if it was real, there would be a Latina, there would be someone who's Vietnamese, there would be someone who is Korean,
Persian,
LGBT. Right. So that diversity is not really mirrored in the media. It is for us.
Right.
So a lot of our outreach is focused on reaching folks who are remarkably hard to get to and who have barriers of language and culture in accessing support. So a lot of our growth is in those areas. Our 2 day centers are hopping. We serve about 300 people a day with occupational physical therapies, transportation to and from, and that sort of thing. So it's important that folks know if they need help, if they're worried, if they have a question. Most of our stuff is free except for the day centers. And you can reach us at our website at alzoc.org, alzoc.org, or you can call our helpline at 844-373-4400, 844-373-4400. That's my little commercial, and thanks, Doc, for the op.
I think you've done this before. That's a
Once
really
or
good
twice.
story.
Although I got to tell you, Paul, I have to write down the helpline number because I always get it wrong, and I've known it for 15, 20 years, but I have a mental block against our own helpline number. So
Talk
I
about
write
the
that one down.
daycare centers. That's what I've known you for the longest. And
Yeah.
I think that my parents went through this out in Palm Springs area, out in the Coachella Valley. If there was a daycare center, we didn't know about it out there. This was 10, 15 years ago. And my dad was my mother's sole caregiver, except on the weekends I came out to help him. And he got exhausted. Just my mother had Parkinson's and then turned into dementia. It was more than he could handle many times. And just to have a relief to take her somewhere and give him a day off and give her some other change up to her routine, not sitting there staring at the television, I think would have been a godsend. What do you do?
Covered by most insurances, certainly Medicare, but reach out to us even if you don't think it's covered, and see if we have some scholarship programs, we have some other ways that it can be taken care of. But at the end of the day, I think the respite for the caregiver is just as important as the socialization and health care received by the person coming.
Amen. Because my mother was pretty demanding at the end there, or took a lot of, it was a full-time job for her to take care of her, to move her to the bathroom and answer all her little questions. And can I get some more water? And what's this? And, just the constant questions, the constant attention that she needed. My hat's off to my dad. He loved her dearly, and he did that without complaint, but it wore on him. I know it was a big burden.
Well, the repetitive nature of this disease, the constant repetitive questions can be draining and wearing for even the patients of Job. So we do an actual class and have some online forums and other ways to support that with compassionate communication. So instead of saying, no, we don't have a doctor's appointment, dear, over and over and over again and getting into a fight, you say, I can't find the car keys. As soon as I find them, we'll go. And you reiterate that a few times until it's all about divert and distract.
Right.
A little bit of therapeutic fibbing, as we call it.
Right. Like you do with little kids. I'm not going to tell you the 12th time no, or answer your question the 18th time. We're not there yet. Oh, look over there. There's a squirrel.
Exactly. And we don't necessarily need for a person to relive the passing of their husband several times a day, every single day. Yeah. There's a better way to support that human by simply saying that person's on a business trip or they're at the grocery store, we'll be back later. And that's a personal family choice where they choose to go down that path of therapeutic fibbing. I understand there are ethical and moral implications for some folk. In my construct, that's a much kinder, gentler way to support a person with memory impairment.
The great Ronald Reagan, when he went through this, I used to, I was privileged to know his daughter and work with her, Maureen Reagan. She spent her last few years dedicating herself to working on this. And the way they described it was, it's as if he had already died, but he's still walking around. That was what was so hard. So eventually, it's got to tear at you and wear at you, seeing this person disappear before your eyes, and yet they're still there, and you still got to take care of them. So.
Yep.
And we are our best selves when we interact with them 100% because they are still there. That we interacted with them as the person that we remember them to be rather than the person they are today, because that's what any of us would want and what we deserve. But it's really takes a toll on caregivers for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, let's come up with some other, give us one more time. You did the commercial so well. Fill out the paper, give us the number, give us the site. If anybody has any questions about this journey, you're the place to start.
First of all, when you call us, you're going to talk to a social worker or one of our trained social work staff. So you're actually going to talk to somebody who's been doing this for a while and who has access to local resources. When you think a problem is insurmountable or not able to be helped, at least pick up the phone. We deal with everything from people who don't want to bathe anymore to taking the car keys to placement. Right. Our helpline number is 844-373-4400, 844-373-4400. And our website is alzoc.org, alzoc.org. And on that website, you'll find a page that has over 200 resources. If you're not into the phone call, then you can at least go surfing for information on the website.
Taking the car keys, there should be a whole course on that one. I had to fight that one a couple times. What do you mean you still want? I'm perfectly fine, and he's wandering in and out of the lanes and forgetting where he's going.
And there is a course in it, and there's also people you can hire who will come and test to take the question away from the family member.
Wow.
So that it's, okay, when you hit 75, you have to take the driving test, and then that person gets to be the heavy if needed. And there are also ways to encourage their clinician to be the heavy in that conversation. So there's a lot that can be done.
When my aunt got to that point, she went to the DMV, and they literally, I don't, God bless the lady, but I didn't know they could do this. She basically said, we're not going to give you a driver's license. You can barely walk. And my aunt was like, who do you get to say? I'm still fine. Once I get in the car, I can move my foot. I can. No, you can't. And she was devastated. She was like a little kid. They won't let me do it. I thought, boy, I wish more people would do that.
Right.
I don't know that any of them do that, other than this lady in this one case. But my aunt's hobbling in a walker, and she can barely move. And she says, okay, here to get my driver's license again. Come on.
Yeah, I think they do that. I actually think they do that. It's unfortunate that sometimes people have a good day when they go for their driving test, and they drive just fine, and the next day they don't remember what they had for breakfast. That's where it becomes a little more complicated.
Yeah, right, yes. Exactly. Well, Dr. Trinh, he can't remember sometimes what he's doing. I wonder about his drive. He's talking and driving. He's forgot to turn his mic on here, I think, or whatever. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, take us out, Dr. Trinh. A lot to take in today here. A lot happening in the world of Alzheimer after many years of nothing happening except everybody wrings their hand and says, well, you're getting older. I don't know what we can do. It seems like we can do something, and a lot's on the news these days. Thanks for bringing Jim along to share it here.
Yeah, a lot going on, and so glad that Jim's here to tell us about it, and that Alzheimer's Orange County is kind of leading the pack in bringing awareness, and most of the programs and services for I guess double the number of folks now than 10 years ago.
That's the takeaway for me. Oh my goodness. I thought all this was going to be good news, and we're seeing numbers go down. Numbers are still going up dramatically.
Yes.
Well,
absolutely.
All the more reason we got to talk about it. We got to keep it in people's minds. Don't wait till you're 80 to worry about it. Worry about it now. And doctors out there, get a little more interested in the subject and pay a little more attention to it, because it impacts everything here. What's the leading cause of death in Orange County, and what's the second leading cause of death in Orange County? Isn't Alzheimer's one of them there?
Alzheimer's is the third leading cause of death in Orange County, the sixth in the nation. So it's a game we don't want to win that we're winning.
Yeah, right.
If I'm not mistaken, cardiovascular is either one or two.
Yeah, that's what I always thought, right? Yeah, and cancer's up there or something.
Absolutely.
Well, it's that important. Thanks for talking about it, guys, here today.
Thanks,
on
Tim.
this edition.
Thanks, Ig. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, there you have it. One more great reason to tune in, because there is hope. There is stuff happening, and there's stuff you can do to help. Find out more. Contact the Alzheimer's OC people, or just come check in at Health Talks with Dr. Trinh, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio. Streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.